Hello friends, welcome to our channel. If you want to learn English through stories and enjoy listening to interesting and meaningful stories, then you are in the right place. We bring you inspiring stories every day that will make you think and reflect. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new story. We are here to fill your day with positivity and wisdom through the power of storytelling. So, sit back, relax, and dive into today's story. Let's begin the video. The path to English success. Morgan was a young boy who always found English to be a difficult subject. At school, English was the one class that made him feel anxious. While his classmates seemed to grasp it easily, Morgan struggled with even the simplest tasks. His teacher, Mrs. Williams, would ask the class to read aloud, but Morgan would shrink back, terrified that he would make a mistake. When the class discussed new words or grammar rules, Morgan could barely follow along. He found reading especially challenging. The words often seemed to jumble together, and he had trouble understanding the meaning behind the sentences. Writing assignments were no better. Whenever Morgan had to write something, he stared at the blank paper for what felt like hours. He was afraid that he wouldn't use the right words or make any sense. One evening, Morgan sat at the dinner table, feeling frustrated. His father noticed the sad look on his face. "What is wrong, son?" he asked gently. Morgan sighed and explained how hard English was for him. He said that he couldn't read well, and that writing felt like a huge mountain to climb. "I just don't understand why it's so hard for me, Dad," he said. His father smiled and placed a hand on Morgan's shoulder. "Morgan, learning anything takes time. English is no different. I'm sure that with some effort, you'll get better. It just takes practice. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. They help you learn." Morgan wasn't so sure, but he nodded anyway. He trusted his father, and he knew that his father always tried to help him see the bright side of things. The next day, Morgan's father handed him a book. It wasn't a thick book, just a simple story with easy words. "I think this will help you," his father said. "This story is about a boy who faced many challenges but never gave up. I want you to read it every day." At first, Morgan didn't think the book would help, but he trusted his father, so he decided to give it a try. He sat down in his room and opened the first page. The story was about a boy who wanted to become a great swimmer. He struggled at first, just like Morgan was struggling with English. But the boy kept practicing every day, even when it seemed impossible. Morgan could relate to the boy's struggle, and that made him want to read more. The first few pages were difficult, but Morgan didn't stop. He would read a sentence, and if he didn't understand a word, he would stop and think about what it could mean. Sometimes, he guessed the meaning by looking at the pictures in the book. Other times, he asked his father for help. Slowly, the words began to make more sense. Every night, Morgan would read a little bit more of the story. He didn't understand everything at first, but he was getting better. He started looking forward to reading each night, even though it was still challenging. As Morgan's reading improved, he began to feel more confident. One day in class, Mrs. Williams asked if anyone wanted to read a passage aloud. The other students raised their hands, and Morgan felt a wave of fear wash over him. He wanted to participate, but he was scared of making a mistake. His heart raced, and his hands felt sweaty. But then, he remembered the boy from the story he had been reading. The boy hadn't given up on swimming, even when it seemed impossible. Morgan took a deep breath, raised his hand, and said, "I will read." He walked to the front of the class and began reading the passage. At first, his voice was shaky, and he stumbled over a few words. But as he continued, he started to feel more comfortable. By the end of the passage, Morgan had finished without making any major mistakes. Mrs. Williams smiled and clapped. "Morgan, that was wonderful. You did a great job," she said. "It's clear that you're working hard to improve your English." Morgan felt a rush of pride. For the first time in a long while, he was not afraid to speak in front of the class. He knew that English was still challenging, but he had taken the first step in overcoming his fear. Over the next few weeks, Morgan continued reading the book. His confidence grew as he understood more and more of the story. He also began writing in a notebook, practicing new words he learned. He found that writing was easier when he wrote about things he liked. He would write about his favorite sports, his dreams, and his family. Slowly, his writing became clearer, and his sentences became longer. One day, Mrs. Williams asked the class to write a short essay about their favorite hobby. Morgan felt nervous but also excited. He wanted to write about soccer, his favorite sport. He spent hours that evening writing, thinking carefully about each sentence. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best he could do. The next day, Morgan handed in his essay. When Mrs. Williams returned the papers, she looked at Morgan's essay and smiled. "Morgan, your essay is very good. I can see that you've worked hard on it," she said. Morgan's heart swelled with pride. He had worked hard, and it had paid off. He knew he still had much to learn, but he was beginning to believe that he could succeed. Morgan realized that reading stories had become the key to his learning. The more he read, the more his English improved. The stories taught him new words, gave him ideas for writing, and showed him how to express his thoughts clearly. He started to read more books, not just for class, but for fun. Every day, he would read a new chapter or a new story. Some stories were easy to understand, while others were harder. But Morgan never gave up. He knew that each story taught him something new. He began to look for books that were even more challenging. One day, Morgan found a book about a young girl who dreamed of becoming a famous artist. The girl faced many challenges, but she kept drawing every day, even when things didn't go well. Morgan saw the connection between her story and his own. Just like the girl, he had to keep practicing if he wanted to get better at English. He started reading even more difficult books that made him think harder about the meanings behind the words. Sometimes, he would read a passage several times, trying to understand every detail. But Morgan wasn't frustrated anymore. He had learned to enjoy the challenge. One day, Mrs. Williams gave the class a new assignment. She asked them to prepare a short presentation about a topic they were passionate about. Morgan felt nervous again. Public speaking was still hard for him, but he remembered the lessons from the stories he had read. He knew that success came from practice. Morgan chose to speak about soccer. He practiced his speech in front of his mirror, speaking slowly and clearly. He even practiced with his father, who gave him helpful feedback. Finally, the day of the presentation arrived. Morgan stood in front of the class. His heart was racing, but he remembered to take deep breaths. He began to speak about soccer, describing his favorite players, his favorite teams, and how soccer brought people together. By the time he finished, he was surprised to see that he had spoken with confidence. Mrs. Williams and the class applauded. "That was an excellent presentation," Mrs. Williams said. "You did a wonderful job explaining your passion for soccer. You've made so much progress." Morgan smiled. He had faced his fear and succeeded. Public speaking was no longer something to be afraid of. He knew that it was just another skill he could master with practice. Morgan's journey with English was far from over. Every day, he continued to learn new words, practice speaking, and write more stories. He faced challenges, but he never gave up. Each mistake was a lesson, and each lesson brought him closer to his goal. One day, Morgan's father asked him how his English was going. Morgan smiled and said that he was doing well. He had learned that the key to success was to keep trying, no matter how difficult things seemed. Learning English wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Morgan had come a long way from the boy who was afraid to speak in English. He knew that with hard work and dedication, he could achieve anything. And he would keep reading, writing, and speaking every day because he knew that every step forward was a step toward success. One afternoon, as Morgan sat reading his new book about a boy who overcame difficult obstacles to become successful, his father came into his room and sat beside him. "You've come a long way, son," his father said, looking at the book Morgan was reading. "You have learned to push through challenges, and you've learned that failure is just a part of the process. I'm so proud of you." Morgan looked up at his father and smiled. "Thank you, Dad. I couldn't have done it without your support. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand English. It's not just about the words. It's about learning how to express myself, and that feels great." His father patted him on the back. "Keep going, Morgan. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep speaking. Success doesn't happen overnight, but if you keep working, you'll see results. And remember, learning is a lifelong journey. There's always more to discover." Morgan nodded. He knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but he was ready for it. He would continue to work hard every day, step by step. He had found his path to success in English, and he would walk it with confidence. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's story and found it meaningful. If you learned something new or were inspired, make sure to like this video and share it with your friends. We love bringing you fresh, exciting stories every day to brighten your day and spark your imagination. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, so you never miss an update. We'll be back with more amazing stories for you. Until then, stay inspiring and keep learning. See you in the next video.